The visual effects process on a show like Caprica is as important as casting, story breaking, or any other critical component to telling a story. When we break a story, we talk about what the visual effects sequences will be within that episode. When the episode is being written, those sequences are described to a relative degree in pretty painstaking detail. And the reason why we're able to accomplish this is because by using an in-house visual effects team accountable to the production versus an outside visual effects house accountable to themselves, we're able to involve Gary Hutzel in the process very early on, where we can discuss with them, even at the conceptual stage, what we have in mind. They can tell us what's possible, they can help give us suggestions, they can show us visual references, and so we're very hand in hand from a very early point on. What that allows us to accomplish is not only better shots, but more shots. We can do more than we would be able to do if we were doing this in the traditional fashion of going to an effects house.
One of the benefits of doing the visual effects in-house, with an in-house team, is that we maintain a group of people who are specifically talented in the specific requirements for the show. In other words, Caprica requires a lot of establishing map paintings. We hired a senior map paint artist to achieve those, as well as creating virtual environments, both photoreal virtual environments that pass as real sets and fanciful environments like New Cap City.
Good morning, Cap City. Well, my day is already sucking.
While foreign government forces used heavy armor to push back rebel offensives.
In Caprica, it's a much more human scale kind of story, and the sorts of things that we were called upon to do were more in framing the world and creating the world around the characters, so that the audience could get familiar with the kind of places and environments that they live in, that of course don't exist where the show was shot.
Gary and his team really raised the bar with the virtual set work in episode 10. You'll have to judge for yourself. What they constructed was so much more fantastic and so lavish and would be so expensive from a production design point of view that they achieved it all virtually with visual effects.
Maybe this is gonna be what we've been
Zoe?
waiting for.
Help!
So the visual effects are usually driven by story, not arbitrarily or just eye candy. And at the same time, there's a great deal of flexibility from the writing staff and from the producers to allow Gary and his group to dream up new stuff, to present us with shots, with concept art, with ideas that weren't necessarily part of the conceptual design, that weren't necessarily part of the story, that we will then back the story into if we think they're cool enough.
Zoe. What is this place?
One of the things I think we're also going to be seeing in 1.5, which is visually, it's incredibly rich. I think Gary and his team have just gotten ever more adept at creating Avatar-like tapestries on a TV budget. They're really on the cutting edge of both technology and artistry in this aspect of the medium. We're not just trying to throw out cool effects for the sake of cool effects. We're trying to imagine a rich world, and part of imagining that rich world is imagining a world that we can't look out the window and see.
There was always an interesting thing where we'd get the dailies and you'd look at them and you'd just see a bunch of acting against this bright bilious green background, and you couldn't tell what you were going to get. And then you would watch it, that thing where you would finally see it. Like sometimes you wouldn't see it maybe till it was on the air, and you'd see, oh my God, look at the dirigible. And it would always be this amazing thing that wouldn't just meet what you had imagined when you wrote it, but would always surpass it.
The second half of season 1 really takes the gloves off. The show becomes eminently fantastical, visually arresting, terrifically, amazingly stylized, and with great accomplishments by the visual effects artists. Every bit as remarkable as things that we were able to achieve on Battlestar. And so the show did change, the show did grow and evolve, and the truth is, if you look at the great television shows, they usually do. For years, I worked with Sam Raimi, who used to say sound was 1/3 of the movie. And I've never forgotten that. I've never dismissed that. A lot of producers don't go to the dub. You know, they have their associate producer, their post-production supervisor handle the sound mix. And to me, I've always found that there's a whole nother level of storytelling that you'll accomplish in that context.
Whatever our daughter is, she's not a god.
We're at Dub 4 on the Warner Brothers lots, and we're working on a scene that takes place in V-World, which is kind of an imaginary virtual reality world where horses turn into dragons and a teenage girl can make anything happen that she wants to.
Previously on Caprica. Previously on Caprica.
A dubbing stage is where all of the sound that's been prepared and cut and composed for the picture comes together, and they mix it all together in a way that tells the story in the most engaging way possible. We have to be able to hear the dialogue. We have to be able to be brought into the world with sound effects that make it come alive. Usually there's music that plays along with all of that that provides some emotional context for what we're seeing. And the mixers sit at this desk and make sure that it all happens in a way that makes the viewer sort of enter into the story and become part of it and become emotionally invested in it.
In any given scene, we're, again, looking to make things sound as clean and separated as possible. And if you go back and listen to our actual mix, things don't sound great by themselves because we're constantly shaving off frequencies and dipping things and such. So if you listen to the dialogue in certain scenes, it sounds a little bit thinner if you listen to it by itself. But when you listen to it with everything in, you don't notice that there's a certain amount of low end or body to the dialogue that's missing. But I'll take that out so that it gives more frequency range for the effects or, you know, the music to play in that scene, because otherwise things start to just get all muddy and you don't get that clarity and the separation anymore.
Think, sweetheart, where else could it be?
Well, the sound designing part is creating all of the sound of a completely other world, and part of that are things that are very familiar, like the sound of the city, the sound of guns and stuff, of cars, but because it's sci-fi, putting a different twist on them.
It's fun for me to ask Daniel what inspired certain ideas or where some of these design and sound effects are coming from.
What the voice is made out of, since obviously I couldn't record a dragon, is a French bulldog. So I take this sound, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pitch it down so it has a very angry feel to it. And it doesn't sound really big right now, but it gives it the angry feel, the emotional content there. So then I'm going to layer that with some processed dogs. So I've taken a dog and put some reverb on it and pitched it down a little bit. So now I've got the two dogs. Add in some lizardy big hisses into it. Combine those three elements together and you've got... And all of that gets layered in with the dialogue, with the Amanda screaming that we recorded, and then with the music, and that's the sound of the scene.
Like this. Practice a couple times.
We're ready, baby.
All right, here we go.
What Foley is the replacing of all the sounds that are created by the actors. Every sound that they make on set has to be replaced, and it's all performed live in front of the screen, one thing at a time.
The guys were nominated for an Emmy this first season of Caprica, and again, a very passionate team, much like music and sound design in this show, who really step up and bring something passionate to the show. A lot of invention and a lot of creative ideas, and often much more than anyone expects. You can definitely see how much they care about what they do.
With the music of Caprica, I was hoping to help establish the 3 different locations that the show takes place in. You have the world of upper-class Caprican society, Daniel Greystone, and then you also have New Cap City, which is a video game recreation of Caprica City. And then you also have the world of the Taurons, which is a much more traditional, ethnic, ritual, ceremonial society. And each of these needed to have a different sound so that when we're in these environments, we're hearing music that is unique and helps us as the audience keep it straight and remember we're in New Cap City, or we're in Caprica, or we're on Geminon, or we're with the Tauron characters. And in that way, it was challenging, but it was really rewarding as a composer to be able to balance all these different sounds.
Working with Bear has been, it's just, again, like working with Gary Hutzel and his effects team. It's just another really rewarding part of the process, where you take the writing beyond the writing and make the show real by imagining visuals and seeing how music adds immensely to the emotional impact of the show.
I think children, babies, pick up on that stuff, those early feelings. Sometimes I think that's why Zoe and I fought so much.
What Bear has since been able to accomplish with tremendous sure-footedness and amazing flourish was to create a melody, a single melody, that we would then warp and shift and use in different phrases but to overall generally to create in a melodic sense what I think Battlestar did in a percussive sense.
We wove the Daniel Greystone theme, thus what became the Caprica theme, into the score so that you're always hearing little layers of it. And it's an element that I use to kind of unify the whole score. So when you hear that, you know that you're watching Caprica.
Good night, son.
Creating the music to Caprica was very much like the process I had on Battlestar, which is I watch each episode with the producers and discuss it with them and talk about their ideas and what they want the score to do. And then I go back to my studio and I sketch, and I'll sit at the piano and watch the show dozens of times and find the sounds that I think are gonna help tell the story that the producers want to tell. Next, we go into the recording process and we record live orchestra, live ethnic soloist, live percussion. So I wanted it to feel more together, more classical, more intellectual. And so in that way, it features a chamber orchestra with harps and clarinets and flutes and instruments that are more familiar to us, because in fact, the world that Daniel Greystone works in and lives in is a world that is familiar to us as well. It looks like our world.
His work adds immensely to the emotional impact of this show.
Bear does a great job with the score, and he really he finds the moments.
You did it, Yosef. You did it.
That's what you ultimately want, with a television show that works, is that on all these different levels, in terms of music, special effects, the writing, directing, the acting, they're all elements that are working with each other as opposed to trying to override each other, and ultimately become something that is, much more than just a bunch of words on a printed page.